This is the lecture for When Robots Should Do the Wrong Thing by Brian Talbot, Ryan Jenkins, and Duncan Purves. This article talks about things they call consequentialism and deontology, and these are two moral theories. And since this class is about morality, it's going to help us to have these two moral theories kind of in our minds, both for understanding this article and for thinking about ethics as we go through the rest of the course. So starting first with consequentialism, which is the simpler kind of moral theory. So these are theories of morality, what is right and wrong, good and bad, virtuous and vicious, things like that. Consequentialism is pretty simple. It says what matters in morality are consequences, and specifically, morality is about promoting good consequences and minimizing bad consequences. And there are different kinds of consequentialists based on what kind of consequences they think matter. But one of the simplest kinds of consequentialism is utilitarianism. And utilitarianism says the consequences that matter are, there's different kinds of utilitarians, but the ones we'll think about are pleasure and pain. So the utilitarian says we should maximize pleasure and minimize pain. So whatever causes the most pleasure for everybody is what we should do. And so the consequences are pleasure and pain, and that's sort of all that matters in ethics. So what is the right thing to do? It's the thing that promotes the most pleasure for all sentient beings and minimizes pain the most for all sentient beings. So the utilitarian only cares about pleasure and pain. So is an action right or wrong? Well, it depends if it's going to cause pleasure and pain. Is somebody virtuous or vicious? Well, it depends on whether they're causing pleasure or causing pain, and how much pleasure and how much pain. And so this is very sort of consequence-focused morality, and that's why it's known as consequentialism. So that's a pretty straightforward kind of moral theory. The consequentialist says is basically a theory of what kind of consequences matter, and then what should we do about the consequences. So you pick the consequences like pleasure or pain, and then it says what should we do about them? Well, we should sort of like maximize the good consequences or something like that. There's lots of versions of consequentialism. Even just utilitarianism has a few versions I didn't mention, but you don't have to be a utilitarian to be a consequentialist. But like broadly speaking, that's what consequentialism is. It cares about the consequences. Deontology or deontological ethical theories are a different kind of approach to ethics. And there's even more variation in deontological theories than there are in consequentialist theories. So it's harder to just summarize them. But broadly, the idea is that according to deontological ethical theories, morality is not all about consequences. Basically, moral patience. So if you recall one of the earlier lectures, moral patience are the things that matter, morally speaking. According to deontology, moral patients have rights, basically. And so what rights are they sort of tell us how we're allowed to treat moral patients. So if you think back to the self-authenticating moral claims that we saw in the previous article, any creature, any moral patient who can make these claims, they have certain rights that have to be respected. So the deontologist might say like, oh, everybody has a right not to be killed or a right not to be harmed or things like this. And so according to deontology, morality is about respecting and promoting the rights of moral patients. And so you can imagine where consequentialism and deontology might conflict. If you violate somebody's rights, you might produce lots of good consequences. So let's say lots of people think that somebody is responsible for a crime and they're actually innocent, but everybody's angry at them and they want that person to be punished. And if that person doesn't get punished, the people are going to riot and they're going to cause lots of damage and lots of innocent people are going to get hurt. You might think, well, to prevent the riot, let's just punish the innocent person. Let's, execute the innocent person or throw them in jail or something. That's the consequentialist kind of approach. It says, look, whatever is going to lead to the best consequences, you do it, even though it might be like, unjust to the innocent person. Whereas the deontologist would say, well, no, people have rights, and among the rights you have is a right not to be punished for crimes that you didn't do if you're perfectly innocent. So, we shouldn't do anything to this innocent person just because the mob is demanding, that they be harmed. And so the deontologist would say, things like justice and fairness and whatever, these matter more than just promoting good consequences. Morality is about more than just promoting good consequences. So these are not the only two kinds of moral theories, but these are two big kinds of moral theories, and they're useful to think about, especially for this article where they're sort of they're both being used quite a bit, but also just as approaches to morality for the future as we think about the various topics that we'll look at in this class.